Hi everyone, a very good afternoon, and we welcome you all to this expert proficiency training session scheduled as a part of SIH 2024 Grand Finale. So today we have with us Ms. Akanksha Rai Sharma and Ms. Shruti. Ms. Akanksha is Technical Program Manager from Amazon Web Services. Also, she is accompanied by a colleague, Ms. Shruti. Ma'am, we welcome you all, and we extend a very warm welcome and a sincere gratitude for you to be a part of this session and sharing your valuable insights and exposure to all the grand finale participants. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Very humbled by your welcome. Um, Firstly, a very good afternoon to all. Thank you so much for joining today's session. And I hope at the end of today's session, we get to learn something new, some takeaways, new takeaways on AWS and generative AI. Before I start, just want to give a very brief introduction of who I am and get to know. It's a good opportunity to get to know each other. So my name is Akanksha. I've been working at AWS for the last 6.5 years. At AWS, I have also worked as a support engineer before my role as a technical program manager. In that role, I've had experience, a lot of experience with AWS services, kind of worked on integration of different AWS services, troubleshooting customer issues, and that's been a really great journey of experiential learning. When I had joined AWS at that time, colleges were not aware of what AWS is. So even when I was hired at Amazon, not AWS. At least I did not know what it was, but I'm glad that we all today have an opportunity to understand cloud, to understand AWS before we go and expose ourselves to the employers and be skilled beforehand. So yeah, I hope today's session will be fruitful for you all. So I'll just begin if that's okay.
Sure, may proceed. Just to kindly update you, we'll be opening the chat section in the last 10 to 15 minutes for answering any queries which will be posted via chat section. You may deliver the content for the time being. Thank you.
All right. So I'll just stop the video to save bandwidth and let me share my screen. Please let me know uh, if it's not visible.
Sure.
I hope my screen is visible now.
Yes, ma'am, it's loaded. Yeah, you can see the deck.
All right, great. So, like I mentioned, today's session, basically our broader heading is AWS Cloud Tools and Best Practices. And in today's session, I wanted to focus more on generative AI because it's the it word when it comes to technology, when it comes to cloud. And that's why I wanted to talk more about generative AI and how AWS essentially you can utilize generative AI with AWS services. So in today's session, we'll basically have a breakdown of session in three parts. Firstly, we'll just have a very generic, very basic definition of what artificial intelligence is so that we're all on the same page. We'll try to define machine learning, types of machine learning, and then we'll switch to generative AI. We'll talk about what Gen AI is. There are certain jargons that you might have heard on when we talk about generative AI. You might have heard about foundation models, large language models. We'll try to understand what these jargons essentially stand for, how it is different from traditional ML that we've been using since decades. And finally, I'll show you a demo on one of the AWS very popular services, which is called as AWS PartyRock, wherein we'd be able to create an application in a matter of minutes. So it'll be a very interesting session. Please feel free to keep notes of your question and please feel free to ask them at the end of the session. I'd be happy to answer any queries related to generative AI at AWS. So let's start with the definition of artificial intelligence. What is artificial intelligence? Generative AI, the nomenclature already has AI in it. So to understand AI, basically, when we talk about AI, it is that we are trying to simulate human intelligence, the decision-making process by building algorithms, essentially computer programs, to take and process information which can inform us of future decision. So if you see here, we have a very simple example of an AI that can be used. So it's a traditional programming approach in which we are basically defining rules, and depending on the rules, we are getting a result. So for example, depending on the temperature, if it is higher or lower than 20 degrees, we are actually simulating a future workflow, that is the air conditioner should be on or off. So this is kind of a very simple AI algorithm that you can use in general day-to-day work. Now, if, for example, I wanted to go a step ahead, and it would be great if instead of providing a computer with some sample data, with some instructions, I just give it some sample data, I tell it what the correct result would look like. And then when I put in some new information, it is able to understand how exactly it is supposed to reach the result. It works backwards and essentially gives you the result that you desire. That is what is called as machine learning. So here you're teaching an algorithm how to learn without explicitly programming it, but by providing it plethora of data and also the results. So that is, it is able to evaluate or create an algorithm by itself. So I'm expecting that a lot of us might already know these definitions, but for the benefit of all our peers, I would want to just, take a few minutes and talk about AI and machine learning. Now, machine learning also has three main algorithms. One is supervised learning, unsupervised learning, and reinforcement learning. Now, what is supervised learning? Supervised learning is basically a machine learning algorithm which has been developed with the fact that the training data, the data that you're using to train your machine learning model is already labeled. So, for example, you're inputting a lot of pictures, the pictures are already labeled. Now, anything new that you input into the model to get a result, it will be looking at the label data, trying to understand what exactly is the expected result, what should be the result, and it will give you a result with certain percentage of confidence, given that it has looked at the label data. However, with unsupervised learning, what happens is that the data that you have is not labeled. It is unlabeled data, and you're inputting unlabeled data, and then you're basically giving a future outcome. Mostly, unsupervised learning is used in use cases such as clustering, categorization, wherein, for example, you put in pictures of various elements in nature. If you put it in a machine learning model, it will categorize these elements of nature, for example, into flowers, into fruits, into trees. So that is something, that is a use case wherein you can use unsupervised learning. You're inputting unlabeled data and you're getting an output wherein you can use this output to cluster a set of things. Finally, we have reinforcement learning. Now, what is reinforcement learning? The word itself suggests that what we are trying to do is that we are trying to reward my machine learning model with a positive reward if the answer is correct, and negative reward if the answer is incorrect. So essentially, it will work on human feedback. You can essentially use human feedback here as well. That when I'm getting an outcome out of my machine learning model, I'm giving it a positive reward when it is actually giving me correct answer, and I'm giving it negative reward when it is giving me incorrect answer. That way, my machine learning model is actually learning my behavior, learning the behavior it is supposed to perform. And that is called as reinforcement learning. You will see that reinforcement learning is used very actively in, for example, gaming, wherein you collect points if you go to the right destination, if you're actually following the path that is supposed to be followed in a gaming world. If you're maybe deviating from the path, or maybe you're performing some activity that is supposed to be penalized, you might be losing out points when you're doing your gaming. So that is essentially the idea of reinforcement learning, that you learn by reward or by penalization. Now let's talk about generative AI, which is the topic for today. So just wanted to give you a definition of all these terms before we jump on to generative AI. As you all might already know, generative AI is a type of artificial intelligence that helps you create new content and ideas, including conversations, stories, images, videos, and music. So I know that most of us are not we are not unaware of what ChatGPT does. We probably use it in our daily lives. So we know that we can create new content which is very human.
Ma'am, I guess there's some technical issue. We are not able to hear you.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, I could hear some kind of disturbance, so I had to pause a bit.
Okay, okay.
All right. All right. I hope my screen is visible. Then we have
Yes.
deep learning, right? Thank you. Then we have deep learning, which is a subset of machine learning, wherein we have neural networks that form the core of artificial intelligence technology. We have neural networks that use artificial neurons, the way we have neurons in our brain. They process the information together, and they're able to essentially solve complex problem. And it is basically a deep learning approach that can solve problems and automate tasks that require human intelligence. Now, the subset of it all is generative AI that essentially came into being due to the um, invention or discovery of transformer model, and we'll talk about that later. But that's a deep dive essentially. That how do we use transformation model and how it led to the development of generative AI. But it's essentially a subset of all three categories, and it is essentially powered by what is called as foundation model. So I mentioned that there are some technical jargons that we listen to every now and then. One of them is foundation model. So we'll try to understand what is foundation model. It is essentially the very basic unit that we talk about when we talk about generative AI. It is a model that makes use of deep learning techniques and helps us generate new content. And at AWS, we have a lot of services essentially that can implement generative AI. And all of these services, essentially, applications on generative AI would be based on foundation models. So let's try to understand the definition of it. So what are foundation models? Foundation models essentially are a class of very powerful machine learning models that are differentiated by their ability to be pre-trained on vast amount of data to perform wide range of downstream tasks. So essentially, you have vast amount of data that is unlabeled in nature. That is what a foundation model is trained on, and it can perform multiple tasks. So these tasks can include text generation, data summarization, information extraction, Q&A responses, and chatbot interactions. They can also generate images, music, video, or code. In contrast, when we talk about traditional machine learning models, they are essentially trained to perform a specific task from a data set. So let me show you an example of foundation model as well. So here, like I mentioned, we have all these downstream tasks that a foundation model can perform for you. All right. So here you can see there's an example of traditional ML tasks and generative AI. I'll give you all 10 seconds to look at this example. So here on the left-hand side, we have a traditional binary classification that is happening through a machine learning model. And on the right-hand side, we basically have a generative AI model that is being used. So you'll see that when we use a foundation model or a large language model, we'll talk about large language model in a bit. When we basically use a generative AI model, you can perform natural language processing tasks such as sentiment analysis. So here, for example, we have, it's my prompt is classify this review as positive, negative, or neutral. And the prompt is the food is okay, but the staff is rude. So with the help of generative AI model, I'm able to get the sentiment, the natural language processing task that also can be performed through a traditional ML model. So the same task can also be performed with a traditional ML model if I had to use it. But in this example, instead of just giving me the sentiment, I can also ask the model to basically give me suggestions for improvement. So this is the essentially task that it is performing, and it is essentially generating new content. It is not just giving me some kind of categorization, classification. It is also generating content to provide me with suggestions based on the feedback that I've got from a customer. So that is what generative AI is doing here. One more difference that you'd see on both sides, if you notice, here I can only perform one downstream task. My machine learning model, traditional ML model, is only providing me the sentiment. However, here in the generative AI model, it is providing me with sentiment as well as with suggestion. So it's essentially able to perform multiple downstream tasks. So that's one of the examples that I wanted to show to essentially be able to visualize the difference between traditional ML model and using foundation model. Another way, another pictorial representation to compare traditional ML and foundation model is this one. Here you can see that in traditional ML model, I'm providing an input that is label data to a single ML model, and it is performing one downstream task. So for example, I've put in label data, I put in the first ML model, it is providing me text, it is generating text for me. And I have to do it individually for different ML models that are specialized in performing just one downstream task. So here my architecture is very cumbersome. However, if I were to use foundation model, that is basically the models, machine learning models on which generative AI is based, I can input unlabeled data, I feed it into my foundation model, and it is able to perform multiple downstream tasks. I don't have to have multiple models, foundation models, at least not as many as traditional ML models, when it can only perform one downstream task. Maybe for image generation, I might need a different foundation model depending on the capability of this one, but my architecture will not be as cumbersome when compared to a traditional ML model. I hope it is clear. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them on chat or maybe in notes if you are to ask them later in today's session. Now here, just wanted to sort of summarize the differences that we've seen in generative AI and traditional ML model. So in traditional ML model, like we've discussed, a model can handle only one type of data, and it can only handle label data. However, with generative AI, it is already pre-trained on massive amount of general domain data. In traditional ML model, you can only perform one downstream task. That is you can only perform one task per model. However, with generative AI, you can have model perform multiple tasks. And we'll also see this in the example that we'll do, the demo that we'll do. Here in traditional ML model, you basically have to carefully train the data. You have to carefully curate the data that you're using for training the model. However, in generative AI, you already have model that is pre-trained on massive amount of data that is unlabeled in nature. So you can essentially generate new content. You don't have to be very careful in training the data. It is already pre-trained on massive amount of data. That is a general domain data. So that's basically the difference between generative AI and traditional AI. So I hope it is clear. We have started with the definition of artificial intelligence, wherein we are trying to simulate human intelligence. Then we talk about machine learning algorithms, wherein the machine creates an algorithm based on the input and output that I provided. Third thing, we talk about deep learning, wherein we basically have a bunch of neural networks that can perform complex tasks, the subset of which is generative AI. Generative AI is a technology that is powered by foundation models. The machine learning models for generative AI are called as foundation models. They can perform many downstream tasks. They are trained on massive amount of unlabeled data. Compared to traditional ML model, we see that our architecture is less cumbersome because one foundation model can perform multiple downstream tasks. I do not have to be very careful when I'm training my model, foundation model, because it is already pre-trained on massive amount of data. Whereas with traditional ML model, I'll have to make sure that I'm using label data and I'm carefully training it to get the outcome that I want. So just a summary of what we have discussed till now. All right, now let's talk about what is a prompt. So when we essentially work on generative AI applications, and I believe that you must have worked on, for example, ChatGPT or any other open source AI tools as well. So you'd see that in order to get a response, in order to generate content, you have to interact with with your application. So you have to interact, you have to give in some input. So a prompt is basically a key to unlocking your model's potential. It's not just a simple question or command, but a carefully crafted input that guides the AI to produce the desired outcome. So the quality of your prompt will basically influence the quality of AI generated content. So if, for example, you want to use, you want to allow your users to put in a prompt in an application that you're creating, you want it to be curated in a way on backend so that the user gets the desired outcome in the desired format instead of just getting any information or maybe hallucinating. So that is why prompt engineering, as you probably know, is also a field that is very popular nowadays. And knowing how to give a prompt is very important. And here there are some best practices that you want to be very clear and specific when putting in a prompt. You should provide relevant context. We'll talk about some prompt engineering techniques as well in the coming up slides. You should use appropriate. Yeah. You should use appropriate formatting and structure, and you should iterate and refine for optimal results. Sometimes you want to maybe make sure that you're also providing feedback to your foundation model to get the optimal result. So you can also do that. So here I'm going to show you sort of a example structure of a prompt. It is not mandatory for you to follow the exact structure, but it's a sort of a example wherein you see that there is a categorization, there is a lot of context given when providing a prompt to get the desired outcome. For some reason I'm being my screen share is getting is somehow getting denied in between. Yeah.
We are just checking that.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So a prompt can consist of these four categories. One is the instruction. What do you want the application to do, your generative AI application to do? So the first field you see that I'm asking that you summarize the restaurant review in a bulleted list. The second thing I'm doing is I'm providing more context. Maybe I'm giving more information about the restaurant. Maybe I'm giving more information about the cuisine. And then I'm providing input, which is basically what I want to be summarized. I want this particular review to be summarized. So there's a review that I've given for this particular restaurant. And then I see that I get an output out of this particular. Just a second. Yeah, and then I see I get this output out of this particular prompt, which tells me what exactly this review implied. So it basically says that, it's a great Italian restaurant, the service is slow, and it's overall a great experience. All right. Can you please confirm that you're able to see my screen?
Ma'am, our IT team has sent a request for you to present, I guess.
Okay.
Maybe there's some technical glitch.
Okay, I'll just check that.
Yeah.
All right. I hope my screen is visible now.
Yes, ma'am, it's visible. Yeah.
Right, great. So I've allowed permissions from my side. All right. So now let's talk about prompt engineering techniques. So these are three techniques that I want to talk about because we're talking about prompt. How do I interact with a generative AI application? And I'll just show you how exactly we can do it, for example, on AWS console in a few moments. So prompt engineering techniques, we basically have we are talking about three types of techniques in this session. One is called as zero shot inference. So what does that mean? I just want to simplify these terms for you. So short basically means example. So when I say zero shot inference, it means that I'm giving a prompt wherein I'm not providing example of how exactly the foundation model should give me an output. So when I say zero shot inference, it means I'm not giving any example. I'm just giving an instruction. So it says classify this tweet and it gives me a certain context of what the tweet is. And I'll see that my foundation model will basically give me a response that says positive. Now, if I want to make sure that, I have my response in a particular format, what I'm going to do is I'm going to probably provide some examples when I'm prompting, when I'm providing a prompt. So in one shot inference, that is, I'm providing one example here when I'm interacting with the generative AI application. So I'm saying classify this tweet. I love this city. I'm basically telling that the answer to it is positive. And then basically what I'm doing is I'm providing the prompt, basically the question, the instruction that I want the foundation model to give me a response of. So here I've provided example and here is the instruction. So here the example says classify this tweet. I love the city. I've told the model that the answer to this is positive and this is the format that I want the answer in. And next time I put in the instruction for my foundation model, it is understanding that, this is the format that I want for this particular response, and it is giving me an output. So this is essentially how one-shot inference works. And when we have few shot inference, it means that we have few examples. It's not just one example. I have a few examples that I'm using. So here, for example, in classify this tweet, we have a few examples of, I love the city, it is positive. It is also giving me one example that shows a negative output. And then it is basically telling me, this is the instruction that I want you to follow and give me an output. So it will tell me what it is. Now let's talk about generative AI at AWS so that I can also show you a demo of what all we have at AWS when it comes to Gen AI. So firstly, let's start from the bottom. So we have a lot of infrastructure available as a part of AWS to be able to support generative AI. So you must have heard that generative AI, because there is a lot of parallel processing that is happening in generative AI and a lot of compute and memory that is required when you basically have a lot of parameters that are to be used, a lot of functionalities come into play, you would want a lot of compute memory. And for that, you would want the right infrastructure to support it. You'd see that after generative AI, we have a lot more conversation of going on cloud, because it's practically very, very difficult, close to impossible, to essentially host infrastructure to support generative AI. We have cloud being used very actively for Gen AI. So we have all these instances that are available, compute devices that are available as a part of Gen AI offering at AWS. Here we also have tools, for example, to build with large language models or foundation model. Right now, I've not defined large language model because it's a little deep dive concept, but you can think of large language model as machine learning models that are using generative AI framework, but are specialized for natural language processing. So if there is a word that says large language model, you know that it is a generative AI model for for languages, for natural language processing. So essentially, we have tools to build with large language models wherein you essentially are not restricted to a particular model. For example, when you interact with ChatGPT, you are interacting with an application that uses a particular model. However, if you use, for example, an offering like Amazon Bedrock, what happens is with Bedrock, you have access to a lot of models, not just created by Amazon, but also created by leading startups around the world. So for example, we have models available, models created by Meta, by OpenAI, by AI 21 Labs, available as a part of Amazon Bedrock. So you can essentially use all these models, maybe a combination of these models or a particular model, and you can create your own application. So it gives you a lot of access, and it is a fully managed service, so you don't have to worry about the infrastructure. AWS manages it for you. So I'll just give you a demo of Amazon Bedrock service in a while as well. And we also have some applications that are already created on top of some particular foundation models and large language models. So we basically have these applications that are built on top of Bedrock using certain models. So basically, you can also create an application such as this. So we have Amazon Q for developer for business. So for example, Amazon Q for developer is an application that generates code for you. So if I were to use Amazon Q for developer, I will just put in a comment that I want to create, for example, a for loop to get sort of indexing for my next projects. And I would be able to do that with the help of the code that is provided. So Amazon Q for developer will basically increase my productivity as a coder. And similarly, we have Amazon Q for business, wherein you can put in your business's statistics, reports, and it will give you a very good visual and understanding and reporting of how exactly your business is doing. So for example, you were to put in financial statements, P&L statements, balance sheets, and if you want your Gen AI application, which is Amazon Q for business, to analyze it, it will be able to give you a very good report that is easily readable by somebody who's not probably from a finance background. So those things can essentially be leveraged. So these are applications that are built on top of foundation models. Here, you do not get to choose the foundation model because it's already chosen for you. You're working on a particular application. But here with Bedrock, you basically get to choose the foundation model. You get to create applications such as this. So I hope it is clear. This is basically a layer wherein you can create or customize particular foundation models, use them in your application. However, here you have a layer wherein you're using applications that are already built on foundation model. And let me show you Amazon Bedrock so that we get a better visual idea of what we're discussing about. So I'll just stop my screen share. And let me share my browser. All right, I hope you're able to see my AWS console. So here I want to show you the Bedrock service, Amazon Bedrock. So this is basically a service wherein you have a fully managed service wherein you can essentially access models by leading startups. So let me show you how exactly you can do that. For example, in this Bedrock configuration, I'll go to model access. And here I can see I have all these models, foundation models available to me. So these are models that are provided by leading startups, AI startups. For example, Meta, Mistral, Stability AI. I also have model by Amazon, which is called as Titan. So I can choose to use any of these models. First thing I'll do is that I'll try to get access to these models. So for example, I've selected some models that I want access to. So I can go ahead and get access to these models first and foremost. I'll click on next and I will confirm that I know that these models that I'm using will essentially be built to my account. So I'll just click on submit to get access to these models. And now with Bedrock, I can interact with these models. So just to clarify, these models, all of these models are not owned by AWS, but they are available through AWS console. So this way you have more flexibility in choosing the model that you want to choose. You might want to integrate multiple models in your application. You can do that with the help of Amazon Bedrock. Now let me show you a chat playground, for example. Here I have the option to select any model of my choice that I have requested access for. For example, I want to use Titan model, and here I can put in a prompt saying uh, provide a list of monuments in India with year of construction. So here I'm interacting with the model, and this is a prompt that I've provided. So if I, go back to the prompt engineering technique, this is basically zero shot prompting. I'm not giving an example on how exactly I want this particular list. Maybe if I'd given an example that I want a comma in between instead of the year being in brackets, I can do that with the help of one shot prompting, wherein I provide one example, or few shot prompting, wherein I provide few examples. So you can see basically I can get an output by interacting with any model. And I can also go ahead and change this model. I'm not, sorry. So I'm not confined to this particular Titan model. I can also change it to maybe Anthropic model. And I can choose this model and I can maybe get a response to the same prompt. So because you have Bedrock available to you via AWS CLI and SDKs as well, you can integrate it with your application. So it's very easy for you to integrate and create an application by using this particular service. So here again, we have a list of monuments with the year, and here I'm using a different model. I can go ahead and also compare models, what kind of outcome I'm getting when I'm using two different models. So I can do that, all of that with the help of Bedrock. I can maybe choose what kind of foundation model I want to use to get an output for my application. So that's about Amazon Bedrock. Now let me go back to the slide. So I hope this gave you a good visual idea of what Bedrock is all about. Similarly, we have a service called as Amazon SageMaker Jumpstart. This service also provides you access to foundation models. Here, basically, you have more, if you're a person who's very technical and who wants to essentially manipulate some factors, such as you want to essentially tweak certain things in the model, foundation model, you have further access to programmatic access to the model as well as a part of Amazon SageMaker Jumpstart. So you can use that as well. If you, for example, want a fully managed model wherein you can just pick and choose the model that you want to use, Amazon Bedrock provides you, like I've mentioned, it allows you to choose from foundation models from leading startups such as AI 21 Labs, Anthropic, Stability AI, and here you can also customize your model. You can fine tune your model by providing more information, by providing, for example, documents related to your organization. Maybe I want to, for example, create an application that provides my institute with the list of courses that should be recommended to third year students or fourth year students. I can essentially use some documentation or some historical data that my organization is having, and I can use that particular data as well to fine tune my model, to customize it, that is so that it is more relevant to my organization and it is not just a very general domain data. So those are essentially things we can do with Bedrock. Another very interesting service that I want to talk about, and I would also suggest that maybe during the session or at the end of the session that you try and use this service, is called as AWS PartyRock. So what is PartyRock? Firstly, it's very easy to log into PartyRock. Even if you do not have an AWS account, you can just look for PartyRock on the internet, and there you can essentially find that it is a service that you can use by just logging in to your AWS account or even Gmail account. And here it provides you a Amazon Bedrock playground wherein you can essentially create an application without putting in any code. So it's a code-free hands-on application that you can build, you can share, and you can also remix. Remix meaning that you can also change certain configuration. So if, for example, I have created an application, my colleague Shruti can go ahead and also tweak the application given that I have shared access with her. So basically, you can do all of that with the help of PartyRock. You do not need to have any knowledge of coding. You do not need, as such, any machine learning expertise. Anyone can build an application with PartyRock, and I'll show you how. So what do I need for it? Do I need a development or machine learning engineering experience? No, I do not. Do I need a coding experience? No, I do not. Basically, everyone can build apps with PartyRock. And let me just show you a demo of how exactly we can do that. And meanwhile, I would also suggest you all to go ahead and maybe log into PartyRock. I'll just share the link with you on chat as well. All right. So let me. All right, I hope the application is visible to you. I've already shared the link of PartyRock with you. It's partyrock.aws. So basically, when you first log into PartyRock, you can do it with your AWS account or Gmail account. It's completely up to you what you'd want to use. And you can create an app just by giving a prompt. So for example, let me go to PartyRock dashboard and let me click on generate an app. So let me create an app. What you want to put here is that, what describes that, what kind of app you want. So for example, I want to create an app that provides movie recommendation. So I just put this information in the prompt. So this is the prompt that I'm giving to create an application. I'll click on generate and I'll wait for a few minutes. So here, basically, you can provide in more information on what exactly you'd want to do with your application. For example, I've created an app that essentially gives you music recommendation. You'd see that a lot of apps are also generated and are open to public as a part of PartyRock. So here, just by putting in a single line prompt, I have essentially an app created wherein I can get movie recommendation. So it's saying that, here I can put in the favorite movie, one of my favorite movies. I can put in the preferred genre, what kind of mood I'm in, and what release year range that I would want for that particular movie, and I would get movie recommendation over here. And I would also get movie poster, for example, here, and movie chat. If I want to talk about that movie or, discuss about that movie, I can do that here. Now, this is a sort of a default or a blueprint of app that is already created for me. I can always tweak it. I can always click on edit and change something about it. Maybe I can also change the name of my application. I can change, maybe some categories. Maybe I do not want release year range as a category. I can just click on edit widget and delete it. So that's completely up to me. Maybe I want to add another category, another widget, another input. So I can also add an input. So maybe, for example, I want to put in a static text that says that, welcoming everybody to this movie Sign Compass. So I can actually add that as well. So I can choose to input as much information, what all information I want in this application. And I can just do that here. I can click on save. And you'd see that, this particular static test is showing now. I can choose to also move it up. So I can also do that with the help of PartyRock. So I can just move it up and I can have this particular prompt, this particular text coming in as a way to excite maybe my customers. I can add more information, something funny, something related to movies. Here, I can also essentially edit and add more output categories. So these are essentially all the prompts that I have that I'm using to input data from a user. Here, I have widgets that are giving me output. So for example, let me put in a favorite movie. Um, Maybe my favorite movie is Interstellar. And preferred genre is science fiction. And mode is happy. And range, I can just keep it as 1990 to 2023. And let's see how it works. Let me just run this particular application. Now you can see in the movie recommendation, it is basically providing me with some preferences. Movie recommendation that, it's giving me a list of movies that I can watch based on my inputs that I've provided, that, this is a particular movie that I like, this is the genre that I like, this is the mood that I want that movie to be in. It is also giving me some kind of movie poster, and here I can chat about the movie. Maybe I can ask about the actor starring in the movie. So it will give me all that information in the chatbot as well. So I can interact this application with chatbot as well. So it is also giving me information on who the actors are. Maybe I want to make that decision based on who is acting in the movie. So this is the way through which you can essentially go ahead and create an application in a matter of minutes. Here you can also, for example, as a part of PartyRock, you can also change the foundation models that are being used to generate content. So here, when I go to different widgets, output widgets, these are called as output widgets, I can actually click on model. Yeah, I hope my screen is showing still. Yeah, I can just click on model here in the output widget and I can choose the model that I want to use. So here I have access to multiple models. I can choose what kind of model I want to use. I can tweak those settings. There are also additional configuration parameters. We'll not deep dive into how exactly these play, but essentially you can also work with them. For example, temperature, if I want the recommendations to be very precise, or maybe, I want the output that I'm getting to be very logical and not very creative. I would want the temperature to be less. Just All right. Then we have something called as top P that essentially also is another configuration parameters that helps us determine what is the set of words that will come that are being used from the dictionary of words. Again, these are a little high level or uh, sort of expert level Gen AI that you'd want to slowly and gradually gain expertise of what configuration parameters are, and then you can go ahead and tweak these settings and maybe get a different result. So you can always do that. You can change temperature, work with it, and see if you're getting a better response from your Gen AI application by tweaking these parameters. You can also do that with, for example, here you can see what model is being used. For example, here stability stable image core is being used to generate this image. And here you can see that you can also provide some negative prompt. What do you not want here in this particular output? Again, in movie chat, you can see that, you have, it says that, I like this favorite movie, this mood, and can you suggest me some movies and we can discuss them? I can actually change this prompt, edit this prompt based on my need. So this is about the movie recommendation app that we have created. Let me also show you another app that I've created, which is called as Mood Tunes. So you can create as many apps as you want. There is a particular limit when it comes to PartyRock, but it's completely up to you what kind of app you want to build. Here we have a mood-based app wherein we are generating music based on the mood. So I can put in a mood, for example, um, I want to put in a mood as melancholic, and maybe I want to use rock for favorite genre, and favorite artist could be Nirvana. And how many songs do I want for this particular playlist that I'm creating for myself? So it's generating a playlist for me based on my mood. So I've entered three, and let me run this app. So it gives me a list of songs, three songs basically, that I might want to listen to based on my mood, the genre that I want, my favorite artist, and the playlist length. It also gives me a playlist cover art, and it will also go ahead and have a chat with me related to the music or the mood that I want this particular app to work on. I can go ahead and edit and maybe, for example, add an output widget. So let's do that. Let me click on add widget and let me add output widget. And here what I'm going to do is, yeah, this is the output widget, widget 8. And what I'm going to do is, I'm going to label it as activities. And in the prompt, I'm going to say that what
Sure,
list.
I don't think your screen is visible.
Oh, all right. Sorry. I hope it's visible now. Yeah. Can you see the PartyRock
No.
app? It says that my screen is being shared. Is it visible now, the PartyRock app? Okay.
Maybe you have to try sharing the whole screen.
Yeah, actually using multiple windows, but yeah, let me do that. Is it visible now, the PartyRock app? So it's in the Firefox window. Is the Firefox window showing?
We can see a window and see that you're sharing screen one, something like that.
Okay. Just a second, let me. All right, I hope now it's visible.
Unmute and tell if you are able to see. I can't because
All right, can you have someone confirm that they're able to see the screen, the Firefox screen?
no.
Okay, let me rejoin the session and test. All right. All right, I hope it is visible now, the PartyRock window.
Yes, ma'am, we can see that. Yeah.
All right, great.
So
All
there's
right.
also a question in the chat.
Okay. I'll just check the question on the chat first. All right, ma'am, PartyRock is working and I have created AI. But how do I integrate into my project? First question would be that what is the project that you're working on? What technology are you working on? You can essentially integrate PartyRock with AWS services. So I'll share a link on chat as well of how you can do that. But it's completely based on where your project is based on entirely. You can also, for example, if you're using AWS, you can maybe create a project from scratch using Amazon Bedrock as well. So you can do that as well, and you can integrate PartyRock with AWS services if you're hosting your AI project on AWS. I hope that answers your question.
25 नवंबर है ना मंडे का 25
All right. Any other questions? I'd love to get some more questions if you have any questions, because that way, if there's any gap or anything that you'd want me to reiterate, just let me know. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you'd have. So let me share my screen and also show you this app that I'd created earlier today. And this is basically a music app wherein I get recommendation based on my mood and my genre. So because I think we had not seen the app earlier due to screen share issue, Let me first show you what this particular app is all about. So this is the app based on, basically will give you a playlist based on your mood, genre, and favorite artist. So basically, all I had to do was again give a prompt that said what I want to do with this app, and it created some sort of default template for the application for me. I can use the same widgets. I can also choose to just go ahead and delete them and add my own widgets. I can always do that. Here I have input widgets wherein it is telling me what exactly I'm trying to get as an input. In output, for example, here I'm actually referring to the input. So for example, in this output prompt that gives me a playlist, the prompt that is being used to get this particular output says that it is based on user's current mood. So it's referring to this particular input that I've gotten from my user, favorite genre, which is essentially mentioned here, also favorite artist, which is mentioned in this particular widget, and the desired playlist length. And then it creates a mood-based playlist for me. For each song, it provides the artist name, song title, and a brief explanation of why it fits the mood. And format of the playlist as it is a numbered list. So I can maybe change some of these things and see what kind of response I get. So for example, I just want song name, artist name, and song title, and nothing else. I don't want any description of what this song is all about. So for example, the Nirvana song, something in the way it says that it's a haunting slow paced track. I don't want my user to get all that information. I want them to maybe experience the song instead of getting that information. So I'll just save this prompt, and now I'll run my application again. And here I'll get a different output. So just by changing the prompt, now I can see it's a more clear output. Maybe there is some extra information that earlier my output text was giving that it is not giving anymore. So I can basically manipulate my prompt to get the desired outcome. I don't want my users to maybe crowded with too much information. Maybe they're using the app using their cell phones, and I don't want them to scroll a lot. I want them to get the list there and there itself. So I can do that by, changing the prompt. And here again, I have a particular model. How can I see what model is being used? I can just click here on the edit settings. And if I click on model over here, I can see that, what model is being used. So I can choose from these two models that are available to me as a part of PartyRock application. I can also again work with the prompt. It says that it has created a visually appealing album based on my current mood, which is again something that I've input as a user. And it is based on the favorite genre, what genre I want to listen to. So you see, it is not based on my artist, but on my current mood and favorite genre. I can also change it to maybe artist. It's completely up to me. If I want, I can actually go ahead and change this prompt to be more specific, to be very different. Maybe it is just based on current mode and not on favorite genre. So I can also do that. And I can also check what model is being used. So for example, here stable image core is being used. So I can check that and edit that for any of these output widgets. Now, for example, I also want that, this is a music app, right? If I go back in the application. So for example, I want to build an AWS project. And here I also want to give, it is a AWS project builder. Here I can put in a project name. I will get a project diagram and step-by-step instruction to complete it. So I can basically put in, for example, I want to create a website with Amazon S3. So let me run this. So it's again a very default template that I have. So right now it's not able to generate image, but it's giving me some sort of architecture diagram. So it's maybe a limitation of PartyRock per se, but it's giving me step-by-step instruction of how exactly I can go ahead and get the use case, maybe achieve the use case, step-by-step instruction of hosting a website on Amazon S3. So I can do that. Here in the application, I can also click on edit, and maybe I want to add some additional data. So maybe I want to add a widget that is adding a documentation. In this documentation, I'm telling the restrictions that are there in the lab environment. The restrictions in lab environment. And what I'll do is I'll ask the customer, the user essentially, will input a document that is also giving restrictions. Maybe I am not allowed to create an IAM role. Maybe I'm not allowed to tweak some settings in that particular AWS lab environment. So I can have my user input that information as well. So I'll move this particular content a little upwards as well, so that it is in the input section. And I will have a user who's using my application also provide restrictions that, you want a project on this particular service, but what all restrictions do you want? Maybe I'll add a widget, input widget, that also asks for services to be used. So I can say AWS services, and I can just enter the content as mention AWS services to be used. And I'm going to save it. So here again, I have this particular widget. Just a second. Let me now move it here. Now, for example, I can tell it what all services I wanted to use. I can only mention the project name, create a website, and maybe I don't want to use Amazon S3, I want to use Amazon EC2. So I can do that, and I can also add some restrictions. I can upload a PDF that says that, what all can you do in this particular environment. I can add that PDF as well, and then I'm going to run this particular application. And here I will see that, my instructions are being, regenerated, and now I'll get instructions to host a website. Instead of S3, it should give me EC2. So let me make sure it's taking the output and generating content based on the output. So it's not taken in the prompt. It is not yet taken list of AWS services as another factor to look at. So I have to put that information here as well. So that's why it's still giving me out of date information, wherein it is giving me an activity that is based on S3. To make sure it is based on EC2, I'll have to make sure that, that is being input in the prompt section of this particular output as well. So it's outdated. It says it's outdated. Let me run this application again. And here it is giving me essentially step-by-step process to host an application on Amazon EC2. So it's asking me to launch an EC2 instance. Then it's asking me to download, for example, install Apache web server, and essentially go ahead and, you can work with the HTML file, make sure that you have the right ports open to access the website, and then you can host the application. So it's given me output based on the prompt that I've provided. Here, because I've mentioned that list of AWS services should also be taken care of when it is designing the step-by-step process, it is taken that into account. So that's about Amazon PartyRock, AWS PartyRock service. Any questions, any queries on things that we've discussed till now? So here, good question. So can I see the code for AI that I created? So unfortunately, with the PartyRock, you cannot see it. That is an application that is based on a foundation model. On Amazon Bedrock, you'll see that, it says AWS PartyRock, Amazon Bedrock Playground. So here you cannot have code level access. Code level access to a foundation model you have with Amazon SageMaker Jumpstart. So that is a service that you can use to understand how exactly, your foundation model is working. So I'll just share the name of the same on chat as well. So using Amazon SageMaker Jumpstart, here also you have foundation models available to you, and you essentially have code level access. You can actually look at the code. Here you basically create endpoints when you interact with any model. So for example, I want to interact with a model, that Anthropic model, maybe, and what I can do is I can create an endpoint and interact with it. And I can also, have code level access, tweak the parameters on that code level access. All right, any other questions on PartyRock, Bedrock, or generative AI? So till now we have defined AI, we have defined machine learning, we have talked about different types of machine learning algorithms, supervised learning, unsupervised learning, and reinforcement learning. Then we've talked about generative AI. It's basically a model machine learning model that generates content. The name of the model that is used in generative AI is called as foundation model. If my foundation model is specialized in natural language processing, it is called as large language model. But you'd see that a lot of people maybe use them very analogously. It's fine. You can use large language model. You can call a large language model a foundation model, but not all foundation models are large language models. So, for example, if I have a foundation model that creates images, that generates images, that will not be called a large language model. So that's about it. And then we talked about, for example, we talked about prompting, the importance of making sure what the kind of prompt you put in so that the user that is using your application is getting the desired output. So the importance of prompting and different types of prompting techniques, zero shot, one shot, and few shot, depending on the number of examples that you're giving when you're providing that prompt. We also try to understand the difference between traditional ML model and generative AI, wherein traditional ML has label data that is put in, that is essentially input in the ML model, and it is only able to perform one downstream task. However, with foundation model, you essentially have unlabeled data, general domain data that is being input into a foundation model, and it can perform multiple downstream tasks. Again, like I've mentioned, your generative AI is based on transformer architecture. That is a little complicated concept, and I would suggest that if you're curious about Gen AI, you can always go back and read a research paper called as "Attention is All You Need." That essentially led to the development of Gen AI. So, would recommend that you read it. And finally, we've talked about generative AI services at AWS. We've talked about the amount of compute devices that we have that can support generative AI activities and different applications such as Bedrock. We've seen a demo on Bedrock, how I can get access to different models, how I can use these models and interact with them. And we've also seen PartyRock, how I can create applications in a matter of minutes. So I think we have a questions. If I want to host a project on AWS, what would be the best option in AWS? What kind of tools can I use? So if you want to, for example, create an application based on generative AI, I would suggest that you use Amazon Bedrock or Amazon SageMaker Jumpstart. If you want it to be a little more technical, if you're okay with, code level information and you're able to work through it, you can also, you can opt for SageMaker Jumpstart as well. So these are essentially services that you would want to actively work on if you want to experience Gen AI at AWS. Uh, I'm expecting that you were referring to project based on Gen AI, but if you're referring to general project on AWS, it would completely depend on what category of services you are aiming. So do you want to create a website on different, maybe based on a compute device, based on S3, completely up to you. All right. Any other questions related to today's session? All right. I hope you all essentially give a chance to PartyRock, try to experience PartyRock and build applications. It would take a few minutes. I would recommend that, you do it maybe today or later and just experience the magic of Gen AI and how you can utilize it to essentially, also co- kind of complete your day-to-day tasks. So maybe you can build an application that essentially helps you with, when you're creating a project, maybe it gives you some sort of pointers to essentially what all things you can incorporate when you're creating a project, so on and so forth. And yeah, I think we have a question on chat that says, can we build a retrieval augmented generation application using Bedrock? Yes, absolutely you can. So what happens with Amazon Bedrock, if you want to use RAG application, there is something called as a knowledge base. So in RAG, what happens is that what I'm saying is that, I am uh, using a foundation model and I'm providing an input that is maybe proprietary to me so that my application, the generative AI application that I'm building, looks at my proprietary information before it goes to general domain data. That's essentially how retrieval augmented generation works. So you can use RAG with Bedrock very much. You can essentially use something called as a knowledge base, wherein you can upload the data that you want your Bedrock to fine tune to in Amazon S3, and you can essentially use it as a knowledge base. So you can use S3 as a knowledge base for your Bedrock foundation model. So you can very much do that, Shachi. I hope that answers your question. If I want to host a project based on NLP model, where to host or deploy it? SageMaker Jumpstart. So you can use either SageMaker Jumpstart or Bedrock. I would suggest that you experience both services and see what you're more comfortable with. Bedrock is a service that you'd be comfortable with even if you have low expertise in machine learning. It is very easy to catch on with. You basically have to have a catalog of large language models out of which you can choose the model that you want to use. However, if you want some code level access that you basically want to maybe change the configuration parameters, maybe there is top P value, top K value, through which you essentially manipulate what kind of response you get with a natural language processing model, which is the large language model I believe that you're referring to. So you can actually use temperature, all of these factors in both the settings. If you want it on code level, wherein you have more access and more level of tweaking that you can do, you can use SageMaker Jumpstart. If you want it to be much more easier, you can use Bedrock as well. So I'd suggest that you experience it and make a call. But both these services can basically be implemented. So how can we decrease inference time using AWS, Bedrock, or SageMaker? That's an interesting question. So what is the inference time for the benefit of all? Basically, it's the time that your foundation model takes to process your input and provide you with the output. So that time that it takes is called as inference time. Inference time would, I think, depend on a lot of factors. It would depend on the machine learning model that you're using, or the foundation model that you're using. It would basically depend on the size of model, how much compute or memory that model is using. So for example, if you have a model that has a lot of compute and memory capacity, then the inference time will be much lower because it is processing parallelly, it is providing you with the output very quickly. But if, for example, you were to use small language model, wherein you are constrained by resources, that is where your inference time would be higher. So it would depend, it would change from model to model. What you can do is you can compare different models. Like I showed you in Bedrock, we have this setting wherein you can compare two models. You can provide the same input and see what kind of response you get. You can also see what kind of time it is taking to get those responses. So you can make that call as well by checking, different models. But I think a lot of it will have to do with the size of the model and the compute and memory capacity of the model. So I hope that answers your question. All right. Any other questions? Thank you so much, Shachi, Pranab, and Mohammed Tahir for asking these questions. I'm really happy that we're having this interactive discussion. Anybody else who'd like to ask questions? It'd be a great opportunity for me to also learn. If I'm not able to answer, I can always go back and learn. But it'd be great if you want any information on GenAI at AWS or anything related to today's session. Happy to answer. You want to deploy your RAG application on AWS? How can I do that? You can use Amazon Bedrock, firstly. You can choose the model that you want to use in Amazon Bedrock. For example, you want to use Titan, you want to use a foundation model by Meta. It's completely up to you what you want to use. Once you've chosen what you want to use, then you can go ahead and associate knowledge base to your model. So there is something called as knowledge base, and let me actually grab a link for you and share it with you for your reference. So let me share this link with you. It's a very interesting article. So here you'd see that you have all the information on how you can use knowledge base and create a end-to-end RAG workflow on Amazon Bedrock. So you can basically host your you can use Amazon S3 as your repository, and you can essentially use that knowledge base to fine-tune your foundation model. So I hope this particular link will be useful to you to deploy RAG-based application on AWS. Awesome. All right. Any other questions we have from you all? I apologize for the technical glitches that we had today. I was not sure what exactly happened, but I'm hoping that we all had a chance to take away something new. We learned something new. So I would really appreciate if you could maybe share feedback with me on, how you like the session, if you like the session, and that will just help us improve as well. So I'll just let me just share my screen and share the link to feedback. Would request you all to please share feedback before you drop off from the call. I hope you're able to see my screen. So I'll give you all the 20 seconds to share feedback. And again, thank you so much for having me. Over to you, Abhishek. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for delivering such great content. I would really appreciate you delivering the content in a quite smooth manner for all the students to understand the very basic concepts and then moving ahead for a pro version. Probably, I also scanned the feedback code. I'll be giving the feedback as well.
Thank
And
you.
I would request all the grand finale students of SIS 2024 to kindly scan the QR code and request for the feedback and honest feedback. I really found it an insightful session. Thanks a lot for having us host the session, ma'am. I would really like to thank Ms. Shruti as well from Amazon.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Really appreciate it. It was great to interact with everybody. I think there's one more question. Ma'am, how can I calculate pricing for S3 database? All right, for that, I'll just share a link of something called as AWS pricing calculator. So let me just share a link. And this is basically a calculator that is provided to you online, and you can use it to calculate cost when you want to make a decision of what all services you want to use. So it varies per region. It varies depending on your use case. You can use that. All right. All right. Thank you again, Abhishek.
Thank you. We have an announcement. We would like to conclude the session. We would request all the candidates to join the follow-up sessions which we have lined up in the coming weeks. We hereby conclude the session. Thank you, Mr. Akanksha ma'am and Ms. Shruti. We hereby conclude the session.